Like any first-tier stage, it thinks its view is the one and only true and valuable view there is, and all others are childish, inaccurate, silly, or just plain wrong. Green has the cognitive capacity to see all the many differences between various cultural claims to truth, hence multiculturalism, but not enough capacity to see the many ways in which the various cultures also share certain similarities, or the many patterns that connect them all in a truly universal, integral fashion, a capacity that, as the name applies, first emerges at the next major stage, the integral second tier. Green also takes a specifically multicultural view by maintaining that there are no big pictures, that there are no universal meta-narratives, such as I am giving here about development and its universal stages, which pluralism would consider pure oppression. And it believes that there are no big pictures or universal truths because it maintains, in densely worded, intentionally obscure arguments, that all truth is culturally constructed, all knowledge is context-bound, and contexts are boundless, and all knowledge is likewise dependent upon interpretation, and interpretation is local, context-determined, and hence relative. But pluralism believes that every one of those claims is true for all people, in all cultures, in all places, at all times. In other words, it believes that all of them are most definitely universal truths. They are not culturally constructed, not a mere interpretation, not a local knowledge, but a pure universal truth, a real big picture, an authentic meta-narrative. In short, it believes that it is universally true that there are no universal truths. It believes that its view is superior, but it also believes that there are no superior views anywhere. This is called a performative contradiction, because you yourself are doing what you claim you cannot or should not do. This view ranks ranking as being bad, judges judging as being oppressive, gives a very big picture about why big pictures are not possible, claims it is universally true that there are no universal truths, places hierarchies on the lowest level of its particular hierarchy, and claims its view is superior in a world where nothing is supposed to be superior. The application of those claims, no universals, cultural construction of all knowledge, the non-marginalizing, interpretation-bound nature of knowing, is behind one of the most widely adopted postmodern philosophies that ever came into existence, that of deconstruction, introduced by Jacques Derrida, who in 1979 was the most widely quoted academic in the United States. Deconstruction, in effect, deconstructed or disassembled, more or less destroyed, virtually all previous approaches to knowledge by claiming that all of them missed their essentially constructed, made up, and interpretive, not universally true nature, and only deconstruction got it right. But the net effect of deconstruction was to destroy the possibility of believing in any value at all. Don't you know that value of yours has been thoroughly deconstructed? There's nothing believable left of it. Moreover, to enthusiastically believe in this value means that you don't believe in that value. And what's wrong with that one? Are you judging it as inferior? Are you being oppressive, marginalizing, repressive? As this general attitude began to permeate culture, values and purpose, and meaning in life likewise began to evaporate. All that was left was that tag team from postmodern hell, nihilism and narcissism. What else could you believe in? Narcissism's scores, we saw, skyrocketed. Slackers saw no value in life at all and didn't even pretend to look for it. Millennials settled for some of the lowest values around, money and fame. Hard to deconstruct those and otherwise fobbed off values. They didn't even go through a rebellious phase as adolescents, since there were no values worth fighting against or for. Books like The Da Vinci Code and The Purpose-Driven Life each sold over 20 million copies as people looked desperately for something to believe in. This whole stance, I call it a-perspectival madness, the belief that no perspective has any value that is better than another one, became perhaps the most common dysfunction of the entire postmodern age, as any believable value evaporated from the culture at large. The only believers in any values who were still left were the amber, religious, mythic fundamentalists who still paraded their absolutistic values whenever possible, showing just how embarrassing values really were if you actually held them. This truly serious problem stops only when green consistently meets with failure in being able to translate the world coherently through its pluralistic structures, which over time become increasingly fragmented, partialized, broken and fractured, tearing the self into partial, tormented fragments as well. Only as the inadequacy and failure of this view is consistently seen and directly felt, and nihilism and narcissism start to lose their flavor, does green let go of this limited pluralistic view and take that monumental leap of meaning into integral second tier. The very important new partial truth that postmodern pluralism was onto is that evolution actually touches everything. The postmodernists would say that there is nothing but history. That is, there are no suprahistorical or foundational truths or final words about anything, but everything rather is the product of a ceaselessly ongoing historical unfolding and creating. From Nietzsche to Croce to Heidegger to Gadamer to Foucault to Derrida, the standard given or discovered truths believed to have always been true and thus able to be discovered at some point were all deconstructed into items that were not discovered but created, not given but invented, not perceived but interpreted, not facts but opinions. All we of today can do is understand that we are swamped and enslaved by ideas that are not true and eternal, but that are essentially fictions that were created at some time in history and then taken to be genuinely true, whereas all they are is historically relative creations with no more validity than poetry or fiction, which are likewise merely created and don't represent existing truths. The drive of most postmodernists was thus to find ways to escape these past fictions and instead act with a genuine autonomy or real freedom, but without postulating any suprahistorical truths that can do so, that can save them. But even if there is nothing but history or evolution, the postmodernists managed to come up with quite a list of things that they took to be very true: the constructed nature of all knowledge, the created fictional nature of truth, the interpretive contextual reality of all knowledge, its having no reality beyond its relative historical unfolding, and this is true for all peoples in all places at all times. If they tried to apply their own relativity to their own statements, which several tried, it simply contradicted everything they said. Thus, there are no truths anywhere, and that applies to this statement as well, so it isn't true either, and so there's no reason whatsoever for you to believe anything I'm saying. That's not a very convincing philosophy, and it is here, after introducing some very important partial truths, that postmodernism fell apart badly. But there is an alternative to this sheer nihilism that still accepts many of the partial truths. Granted that there is nothing but history, nothing but evolution, starting with the Big Bang, nonetheless that history leaves traces, that evolution leaves tracks, they both leave habits, and these cosmic habits create stable and enduring entities, regularities, laws and patterns. Those patterns can be discovered, and the postmodernists themselves discovered some of them, even if they often misinterpreted them. These patterns create the stable and enduring entities of the cosmos, from atoms to molecules to cells to organisms, the stable laws of science, and the enduring stages and states of development that are nothing but the habits of past developments carried forward ceaselessly as habits are. This view is similar to that of Charles Peirce, who saw laws of nature as habits of nature, and it makes a great deal of sense. Further, seeing history as leaving enduring traces, seeing it as genealogical or developmental, gives us a way out of the chaotically incoherent and contradictory view of rampant nihilism that postmodernism left us with. Granted that there is nothing but history, but this history leaves habits, patterns of existing things, and these patterns grow and evolve and historically unfold, novel habit by novel habit by novel habit, leaving more and more habits as patterns that connect. And these patterns, including things like quadrants, levels, lines, states and types, succeed in building up a manifest universe whose stable habits are the foundations of various genuine truths which are discovered as these enduring pattern habits are discovered. And this also means that new truths are continuing to be created, enacted, and laid down each and every moment. So where truth as habits are discovered, truth as emergence are newly created. We never have the final word because new historical entities and their habits are emerging all the time, and as long as they mesh with previous patterns, they will be carried forward as new habits in the ongoing growth and evolution of this cosmos. And the human mind, another collection of evolutionary habits unfolded and interwoven historically, can itself start to understand this truth, especially when its own complexity reaches a level of existence that can comprehend these complex habitual relations. And that begins most noticeably at the level of development known as integral second tier, and the monumental leap of consciousness to that level.